All right. I am live on YouTube. I am here in my class. And today we're going to talk about attachment theories, um, all of the theories about attachment. And I think it's the most fascinating topic to discuss because it has so much of an impact on how well you are able to relate as an adult. So much of our life, everything that we learn about human relationships, everything that we learn about um, how to love, how to take care of others, how to feel important, our self esteem, everything has to do with the very early connections that we had with our primary caretaker. And there have been so many people researching this that it is without a shadow of a doubt has an impact on our future life. And so one of the first people to dive in and talk about these things is a man named John Bowlby. Okay, and John Bowlby was a British psychologist, and you'll notice that a lot of this information came from Britain. Britain did a really good job of studying this. They were ahead of the scene in studying the connection between parent and child, the bond between a parent and child. And John Bowlby was the very first person to call it attachment. He was the pioneer in attachment. And what you'll find is that he's the person that put the label attachment on it. And there were other people studying and researching and um, talking about understanding that early stages into a child's development really had a particular impact on how they are able to function current day. And so what we learned was that John Bowlby studied this, began the study of what we call attachment, that a lot of us as social workers and practitioners, we now understand and we know that this is very important in terms of development, right? So he talked about, he said, attachment is known as it's a very unique thing that happens with children and infants at a really early age. And it's a very strong emotional bond that develops between a caretaker, a caregiver, and at the time, this is the early 1900s, so it was typically the mother, typically the mother, but it doesn't have to be the mother. It's the bond between the primary caregiver. And we now know that the primary caregiver can be the mother, but it can also be the biological father. It can be the grandmother. It can also be an adoptive parent. But a lot of the research that happened about attachment early on, particularly looked at the bond between an infant and the mother. Okay. And he also noticed that in this unique, strong emotional bond that develops between the primary caretaker and the infant child involves an exchange of comfort, care, and pleasure. And he was talking about how an infant needs consistency care from a person who is both reliable and predictable. He noticed that this is very important in the early stages of development is reliability and predictability between a primary caretaker. And so early experiences in childhood, they have an important influence on development in later behavior in life. And a lot of the work that I do in my private practice is I work with couples. So Amari, you got to know this. You need to know this. A lot of how you function in your marriage, you being able to trust your significant other has a lot to do with when you were younger. Did you have someone in your life that you can trust? Were you encouraged to talk about your feelings and emotions growing up? And then you get into a relationship, it's easy for you to talk about how you feel and what you were thinking. Because when you were early on in your development, your life just encouraged you. So I think what's interesting is that what this I study under a name, you might want to write her name down. Her name is Sue Johnson. She wrote this wonderful book. So anybody who's interested in doing any sort of couples work, couples therapy and couples work, get this book called Hold Me Tight. by Sue Johnson. She based all of her research and all of her information on couples and healthy relationships. She based that on what was your attachment style like early on? Because here we grow up, we get into a marriage and we marry somebody, and then all of a sudden, our spouse is expecting us to tell them, like, I can't read your mind. I don't know what you're thinking. You got to open your mouth and talk. You got to tell me how you feel and what's going on with you. But it's sometimes if you're not accustomed to talking about how you feel and what's on your mind, you didn't grow up in an environment where that was encouraged. You get into these relationships and there's a lot of issues happening in the marriage because it's just not natural for you. And that's a lot of the work that I do in my couples therapy is to talk to and get a healthy attachment between your spouse with somebody who, even though you haven't had that type of background that will help you make you feel comfortable trusting somebody so that you can articulate how you feel and what you think, you can still learn it as an adult. So that's a lot of the work that I do with a lot of couples. I ask them questions about their childhood, their family of origin. What was it like? Did you know what happened when you felt sad when you were growing up? Did you have somebody that you can talk to about feeling sad, someone you trusted? And a lot of people who come into my office and they have issues in their current relationships, they often tell me, no, I didn't have anybody I could talk to. I had nobody I can talk to early on that encouraged me. No one I can talk to that encouraged me to talk about how I feel. And of course, it's going to be difficult in later in life. So John Bowlby was the first person to point this out, that these early experiences in childhood have an important influence on the development and behavior in your later life. So an infant who receives constant care from more than one person often can form attachments with more than one person. So it's important for the people who are in contact with children and infant in early life, be somebody who can give them that consistency and reliability early on. So he coined this early attachment styles, and it's established in childhood through the infant and caregiver. And John Bowlby was the very first person to talk about there's a critical period. He noticed that it happens early on from 0 to 4. And we know in terms of brain development, in terms of all of our knowledge and how the brain is formed, is contingent on whether our environment was conducive to form this sort of attachments. And so he saw this and said there is a critical period. And I know in last class, I talked a little bit about Harlow's research about the rhesus monkeys. And this was going on at the time. John Bowlby was like, wow, this is related to what happened with the rhesus monkey. So they'll have a newborn infant, a rhesus monkey, and they'll have two surrogate mothers, and one mother is wrapped in terry cloth, okay, a nice soft terry cloth, and another mother will be is wrapped in a wire mesh that's really kind of prickly when you touch. He found Harlow's research found that the rhesus monkey gravitated and went to the soft terry cloth mother, something soft and cuddly to hold on to and attach to, that was more likely than the wire mesh mother, even if there's food involved. So they would put food next to the wire mesh mother, and the infant rhesus monkeys wouldn't even go over there where the food was. So that tells you that attachment is so important in human development. And there's so many people that say, I don't care about no relationships. I don't care if I'm attached to somebody, I want to be a loner. Well, I question that, because I know that connecting with other people is just as important as nurturing your body, if not even more. Your connection with other people is just as important, if not more, than being able to eat, sustenance in your body. And that's what we learned with John Bowlby. Okay. Moving on. Some of the particular terms connected to John Bowlby has to do with, of course, attachment. And he talks about a bunch of different things that a lot of other researchers really go into. Ainsworth kind of goes into this a little more, but they talked about a safe haven, that he noticed that toddlers would, he noticed that toddlers would often play independently, but they would play close to connected to their mother. So they would go off and they would play with their toys, and their mother would be in the room, and then they would bring everything back to what's called a safe haven, a secure base. When you're at a party and there's kids all around, there'll be moments where the child will just go right up to the mom and show the mom something, and that lets you know that's kind of base. You know what I mean? So a toddler will be playing with toys, but they may have their arm, or they may be laying against their mother, something that's a secure base. And one thing he said that is very he also coined the fact that what's appropriate is that there's some distress when you're separated from your parent. That one person who's your primary caregiver, when you're separated from them, you get a little distressed because you're thinking, okay, wait, where's that lady? Where's the lady that gives me love and nurturance, that's consistent with me? Where does she go, and when is she coming back? That sort of thing, the separation distress, is very common. So let's look into that a little more. Okay, proximity maintenance. That is really the desire to be next to people, like I talked about, who we are attached to. And it also, when you're playing and you're exploring, you don't, there's like a radius around your primary caretaker, he noticed, with toddlers, where they would only get but so far away from their primary caretaker, particularly the mother, because they don't feel safe. They're in this sort of safe haven. And he also noticed with the safe haven, the return to attachment figure for comfort. So if a child is playing and they hurt themselves, they're going to go up to their mom. I remember my kids would come up to me and they had like a little tiny cut on their hand. They wanted to show me, and I'd be like, oh, okay. If it's bleeding, I may stop what I'm doing and go to get a Band-Aid to put around it, because that was something that, they feel safe. Like, I know this lady is the lady that's going to take care of me. So I was considered like their safe haven. If there's fear, if they're crying, if something happens and they're playing and they get upset, they know to come to me, or they know to come to what would be called a secure place. And so secure base is where the attachment figure acts as a base of security, from which the child can explore the surrounding environment. And if that secure base isn't there, what John Bowlby found in a lot of his in his research was that if that secure base was not there, then the child didn't even want to play. The child's not even interested in playing. They're more interested in safety and security. So if a child doesn't have safety and security, they can't go around and play. They don't feel comfortable playing. So they tend to be kind of like to themselves. Separation distress, of course, I talked about that. It reflects the young child increasing cognitive abilities also, right? So around a certain time in their development, they are aware. They reflect growing emotional bonds and these social bonds to the caretaker. So separation distress within a certain limitation is really something that you want to see. You want to see this in the child. And as social workers, we're assessing. How could we not assess? We're assessing parent-child behaviors all the time. And we have to be able to understand where separation anxiety is appropriate in certain age groups, and where we need to cut off and understand that it's not appropriate. So separation distress refers to severe distress that occurs when a child is separated from their primary caretaker, and it begins at about 6 months. So at 6 to 8 months, this is true, and it usually subsides to about 14 to 18 months. Now, if you're like in first grade If you're assessing a child in the first grade and you find that this this separation anxiety is still happening, they should have grown out of it by then that should tell you that something is not normal, right? So the DSM has a diagnosis for separation anxiety, but early in child, from 6 months to about a year and a half, if you see this separation distress, it's normal. It's not a disorder. It'll become a disorder if they don't eventually grow out of it and you start to wonder what's going on. Okay, any questions on Bowlby before I move on to Ainsworth? Mary Ainsworth. Okay, Mary Ainsworth studied under Bowlby. She was taught by Bowlby, and she and her research team carried on a lot of Bowlby's initial research. She devised what's called the strange situation. And it involves several phases from which the mother leaves the infant alone in a room with a stranger, and then the mom comes back. And she recorded the reaction of the child that came back into the room. She and her research team, they put together, and this is the birth of attachment styles, where attachment styles in childhood are formed. And she was able to group. Initially, she grouped everybody into 3 categories, but later on, she learned through some of her other researchers who were working under her that really this attachment, there's actually 4 categories of attachment. The strange situation, and I have a video on it that'll really show you what she did, and it's Britain, so it's a British accent. And so you have to get used to listening to that. But let me share my screen here. Share screen. Share screen. Oh, it's not letting me share on here. Okay. Well, oh yeah, here we go. Strange situation. Share. Okay, so let me do it over here. Oh, wait. The Mary Ainsworth. Okay.
Translated into a standard laboratory setting for controlled scientific studies. After conducting extensive observations of parents and children at home, a student of Bowlby's, Mary Ainsworth, devised such a procedure called the strange situation, which places the child under some stress. It has become the most widely used standardized way to assess the quality of a child's attachment to their caregiver.
Can you hear?
Here the researchers are recording how 14-month-old Lisa responds in this attractive but unfamiliar setting. How will she react to a stranger? What will happen when her mother leaves the room? And when she returns? It's Lisa's behavior when her mother returns, what psychologists call the reunion, that they are particularly interested in.
Most importantly is to look for the type of balance that a child strikes between an attachment need and, on the other hand, to explore the play material.
Once Lisa has settled down to play, a stranger enters the room and sits in the chair reading a magazine. After a couple of minutes, the stranger attempts to interact with Lisa. Soon after, Lisbeth gets a cue to leave the room. stranger tries to comfort Lisa, but in vain. Lisbeth comes back into the room, and the camera records how Lisa reacts. Now the first part of the procedure is over, and Lisbeth settles Lisa down again. The stranger leaves them alone together. And soon after, Lisbeth goes too. Lisa is on her own. Her distress is plain to see. Once again, the efforts of the stranger to console Lisa are to no avail. But Lisbeth manages to calm her almost at once, and shortly afterwards the observation ends. Lisa showed outward signs of what's called secure attachment.
Dr. Drew, my wife Susan here. We want to show you something.
You've probably seen this guy all over your feed claiming that cutting carbs isn't necessary for weight.
Okay. Yeah, I know there was a little echo. Sorry about that. But as you can see, what did you all notice in that strange situation? What happened? What happened when the mom left the room?
I felt like the baby was confused. I couldn't really hear the noise, but I could tell, like, towards the end, the baby kind of was crying.
Yeah.
So
That,
like when then the stranger came in to kind of approach, to kind of secure the baby, calm her down. And then I just like the baby was so confused.
yeah, the baby, the baby was playing nicely. As soon as that mom got up and went to the door, that baby was like, hey, wait a minute, where you going? That baby was scrummaging to the door. She almost closed the door on the baby. She almost didn't make it out of that room.
She did. I saw that. She did crawl very fast to the door.
She was like, hey, that's the lady. That's my safe. That's a good sign. You want to see that at that age. What else did you guys notice? Baby was stressed out. What did you notice when the mom was away and that stranger was there? The stranger went up to the baby. Mm-hmm.
I think maybe the baby was trying to process like who this person is, or like, can I open up? And however babies develop that sense of understanding.
Yeah, that baby wasn't really into that stranger that was in that room. And then when she came back in, what was the baby's response? When the mom came back in, huh?
Baby calmed right down.
Oh, the baby calmed right down. Went right up to his mom. The mom she picked him up and she patted that baby down. That baby calmed down. That baby was not going to be like, no. That's what you want to see. That tells us that we have a secure attachment. So we know when that baby, if that secure, there's nothing to disrupt, because there's a lot of disruptions that can happen. The baby calmed down. There's a lot of disruptions that can happen between a mom and a child, and we'll go into that. But a securely attached child, you will see this pattern across the board. Okay? A securely attached infant is upset when his mother, in his mother's absence, and actively seeks contact with the mother when she returns. And you see a lot of this in daycare settings, right? You drop your baby off at the daycare. I bet daycare workers probably have a lot of interesting observations. They can tell when their mom comes or the person who picks them up come, and that baby don't run up to them and be like, hey, let me show you what I did today. They don't, if they come to them and they're excited, that lets us know that there's a secure attachment. And mothers when mothers themselves are securely attached, then they're more likely to be emotionally sensitive and responsive to the baby's cues. So a lot of the secure attachment you pass on to your children. And so as social workers, we have to be able to assess that and be able to look at those things and ask questions. Well, what was it like for you growing up? You know, just like when I work with my couples of securely attached individuals who want to form families and get together, I talk to them about how are you going to break these generational curses and do better for your child than what was done for you. And you see a lot of people raising awareness of this and saying, no, I don't want what happened to me also happened to my child. I didn't grow up in the best environment. And you can work with somebody, you know, to kind of help them and show them the cues and lessons of that. But typically, a securely attached pattern is more likely to develop when mother has adequate social supports. You can be consistent when you don't have to worry about what's going on in life. You don't have to worry about finances and worried about, you know, housing issues and all of these other issues. It helps you to become a better mother and I talk about this a lot, that when your significant other is somebody who's supportive to you, the child benefits. And this is why. Because if you got a lot of fighting going on in the household and you bring a baby into this chaos, that baby is affected, immediately affected, probably, you know, while the mom is pregnant, right? The child is immediately affected by those things. And so the environment in which a child is raised in, not only does the child need to be safe and secure, but the mother also needs to be safe and secure. So if you love your children, you also got to love the other parent because that's how it works. Okay. So when a mother is present and responsive and warm and caring, we have a secure attachment. Okay. Moving on, she also talks about insecure attachments. And so the other three are insecure attachments. One of those things is avoidant attachment. Now, avoidant attachment happens when the baby shows little distress when the mother leaves the room. So an avoidant attachment pattern, what they noticed in their video was that the mom would leave the room and the baby didn't show any distress at all. Didn't even know if the mom was in the room or not in the room. And when she comes back into the room, she, avoids a signal when she returns. And so she noticed that there was this avoidant attachment there. And I mean, just think about how many people avoid things in your relationships, right? It has to do with early attachments. And she noticed that mothers of avoidant children tend to be very impatient with their children. They tend to be non-responsive to their child's needs, or they tend to be over-responsive. So they tend to be one or the other, but they're not really regulating very well. And they either provide the child with too much stimulation or not enough at all. It's, this happens a lot when you have a mother with mental health issues. The attachment is really difficult to develop because they don't have the self-awareness to be able to understand the cues from their child. Okay. No preference for the mother and for the stranger. Okay. Ambivalent attachment. She noticed that ambivalent attachment happened when a baby exhibited this pattern where they were very disturbed when the parent left the room. But when the mom came back in the room, they were ambivalent. When the mom returned, sometimes they may get angry or they get resistant. It's very difficult for the mother to console the child. Remember how the child, for a secure attachment, the child came up to the mom and she was able to calm him down. With ambivalent or anxious, we call it anxious attachment, it's very difficult for the mom to calm the child down upon return. And she also noticed that they were wary of strangers. That these mothers were very moody and very inconsistent, very less responsive. So, so this is what she noticed with ambivalent attachment. Okay. Disorganized attachment. Yes, disorganized attachment. Now, disorganized attachment happens when a baby exhibits fear of the caretaker. They're scared of their mother. They're dazed and confused. Facial expressions are really strange. And there's other kind of disorganized attachment. It's almost like they don't know what to do. Like they're I think it happens when attachment behavior. So they greet the mom when she returns, but they may be crying and the mom is not able to really calm them down at all. It's just a real kind of disorganized attempts. And what she found was that 80% of infants who have this sort of attachment are severely mistreated by their primary caretaker, and they exhibit this sort of behavior where it's just disorganized. It's almost like they have this desire to connect to the mother, but they're afraid to do it. So you'll see them kind of approach the mom, but then it's like something comes in their head and they remember, oh no, this person is not quite safe, so I'm gonna back up. And what you see in adulthood with disorganized attachment, how they look when they're adults, is that they'll get into a relationship with somebody. They'll say, you know what, I really want closeness with this person. And as soon as that person is close to them, they get afraid and push them away. So they become very disorganized in how they are in their relationships with other people. And that should let us know that there was child abuse happening early on. Okay. So this kind of effect of insecure attachment, it's predictable. I think it's pretty predictable, and it definitely sets the tone for how they are, how people function and operate when they're older. You don't, and a lot of people, as a social worker and a clinician, nobody's going to come into your office and say, I have a disorganized attachment. No one's going to come in and say, I have a ambivalent attachment, avoidant attachment. They're not going to even remember a lot of the things that happen when you have a lot of childhood abuse. A lot of people don't even remember. They don't. I said, what was it like? What was your childhood like? You don't even have memories because they block a lot of the stuff out. But you don't need to know. You don't need for them to regurgitate the memories of what happened to them when they were younger. They're not going to remember anyway, because the body is a beautiful organ and it does whatever it can to keep us, it does whatever it can to keep us sane. Because sometimes you don't want to open Pandora's box and start digging into all of the things that's happened to some people who were abused as a child, but you'll know that they are abused because they have this disorganized sort of thing. They'll be saying, I really want to be close to somebody, but every time somebody gets close, I notice I get afraid and I push them away. My spouse is telling me that they want intimacy with me and I want to have intimacy with him or her, but I just can't because I'm frightened by it. And then you start thinking about early childhood origin issues. Okay. So let's talk a little bit. Why did I pin you for the thing? Okay, so let's talk. So Wes, what do you think is happening? Why? What are the factors that interfere with attachment? What gets in the way of a mom being able to, or a primary caregiver being able to attach with the child? I wrote a list of things down last night. I want to see how many of these things that you guys are able to identify.
Maybe something like job security, like trying to be able to work and like get enough like income to not like to care for the child, but also making time to be there and like show them love, like physically, you know.
Poverty. Yes, poverty is one of the things that gets in the way of this mother-child attachment, primary caregiver attachment. Poverty. Yes. Let's name some more.
Postpartum depression.
Postpartum depression. Absolutely. Depressed mothers are not responsive to their babies. We now know this. They overlook social cues. They are preoccupied with their own painful feelings. They can't even think about what's going on. It's hormonal. Yes. I need to check off. Y'all are getting all the good ones. Okay, what are the other ones?
Maybe like substance abuse.
Yes, absolutely. You better believe it. Substance abuse, drug abuse, alcoholism, all of that gets in the way. The maternal factors that get in the way.
I was gonna say like forced pregnancies. So with like the whole forced pregnancy, so like having to be forced to continue with the pregnancy.
Yes, that is so brilliant. There's been research on that. The origin of how a child was conceived, that story, and whether that child was wanted or not, has a big impact. And we know we can predict a lot of things are predicted just based on the overturn of Roe versus Wade. We can now predict there's going to be a lot more child abuse and neglect in our future, just from making sure that people aren't able to have a say in their reproductive health. We are now able to predict in all the areas where people aren't able to have an abortion, and they're not given. It'd be one thing if they said, okay, abortion is illegal and we're going to give these mothers some support. We're not doing that. Nobody is saying we're getting rid of abortion and that's it. If you're going to get rid of abortion, give these mothers some support, because you're going to have a whole lot of disorganized, attached individuals who, by the way, grow up and become, they have hard life. I don't want to put that on people, because there's some people who are able to recognize it and heal from it, but a lot of people don't heal from it, and they're angry about it because they weren't wanted, really not wanted. So yes, thank you, Jeremy. That was beautiful. What else?
Maybe like sexual assault, like maybe in their childhood.
Yeah, abuse. Yes, abuse, that the mom has been abused. Also, teen mothers. Teen mothers are less responsive if there's no interventions. There have been a lot of interventions with teen moms where they're able to say they're young. They're saying, look, your baby needs this. So yes, being a teen mom and definitely abuse and neglect, for sure. Babies definitely take on their mother's moods. So we talked a lot about maternal factors. Think about what's going on in the home.
I was gonna say like single moms, or if like they are married or having marital issues.
Yes, domestic violence. They're having domestic violence issue, low social support in their household, that can interfere. Definitely stressors. Why does this interfere? Poverty, domestic violence, chronic stress, low social support, high environmental stress. Why is that a problem? What's going on there? What's going on with the mom? Think about a mom with an infant. She ain't got no money. She fighting with the daddy. She got all these stresses going on. She got nobody to support her. The neighborhood is a mess. What's going on with this mother? How's she feeling?
She's still in survival mode and not able to be nurturing.
She can't be nurturing. She's drained. She's tired. She's trying to make ends meet. The mom is emotionally drained, too preoccupied, too drained with her own immediate issues. She can't even think about somebody else. Yes. Particularly if there's a whole bunch of kids in the home. This ain't her first child. She didn't have all these kids with all these people. Multiple children in the home.
In a domestic violence shelter, we could always tell kind of what we were getting at intake if the babies were willing to come straight to us or not. So we would always be like, some people like, oh, she's so good. She lets anybody hold her. And I'm like, this is not good.
You're not supposed to let everybody hold you at that age. I see that a lot in infants where they're like, oh, you can pass that baby around to everybody. She doesn't even care who holds her. That's not appropriate, especially at 6 to 7 months. It's appropriate when infants are like, oh, you're a stranger, I don't want you. There's an issue in that home. When that baby goes to everybody, when the baby goes to everybody, that's a problem in the home. Something's going on with attachment, absolutely. The mom is not responding adequately. A whole bunch of people in the house, a whole bunch of little kids, no support from the partner. We talked about maternal factors and stuff in the home, but there's also infant-related factors. Y'all didn't mention them.
Like health concerns with like the baby.
Yeah. If the baby is premature, infant, it can tend to be less responsive than full term. And I think there have been a lot of interventions that have helped this along, but neonatal care unit, if they spend a long time in neonatal care units, if they spend a lot of time in those units, it's difficult to snuggle up with your mama and daddy. It's hard to do it because you got all these tubes everywhere. So really attachment begins when the child comes home. When the baby comes home with the mama, that's when attachment starts. And sometimes it's tough to do if a child is born, with some complications. They can't go home. Maybe they've been exposed to drugs and alcohol in utero. That can make it difficult. And then sometimes some babies are just hard. Temperament. That's hereditary, by the way. Temperament, baby's temperament. Sometimes infant-related factors can interrupt the attachment sort of situation. Okay, moving on. So we talked about Ainsworth and her beautiful research. Let's talk about who she trained. Okay, so she trained Mary Ainsworth trained this lady, Mary Main. I guess she's still with us. 1943, then she's 80 years old. I don't know what Mary Main is doing, but Mary Main trained under Ainsworth. And she talked about attachment in infancy and how it affects relationships throughout the lifespan. She's a professor at UC Berkeley. Okay, so she's still around. She's 80 years old. I bet she's still doing lectures. She's still hanging out. Professors don't retire, by the way. It's one of the best jobs in the world, really. Like, if I complain, I'm really just being spoiled, because I enjoy, this stuff. There's really nothing to complain about. But anyway, she talked about adult attachment styles. And she created this, it's called Adult Attachment Interview. And it's a structured interview that she would give to adults. And through this interview, she identified 4 attachment styles, particularly to adults. And one of the attachment style, of course, is secure and autonomous attachment. And she said people with this sort of secure, autonomous attachment, they are trusting, they have really good, strong relationships with people, they have lots of friends, they have really good boundaries. They when they need help, they're very comfortable asking people for help. They're very comfortable giving help. They're comfortable sharing their feelings with their partner. They're just secure in themselves, and they have a positive view of themselves because they were given a positive view of themselves early on. And they also have a positive view of other people around them because the people around them have always been pretty positive, right? For the most part, people close to them. So they're able to trust. They have consistent, loving relationships. They don't have a whole path full of broken, toxic, them toxic relationships where ain't nothing going on. Toxic, always some drama. Well, everybody you date, there's always some drama going on. Not these individuals. If you're secure in an autonomous relationship, you're comfortable with just just expressing yourself. You can express your needs, your emotions. You maintain healthy boundaries. You don't have any boundary issues. You're good with balancing between independence and interdependent. You're not dependent on somebody, but you're just comfortable. These are really interesting adults in that way. Another type of attachment style she found was dismissing attachment. And wait, can you see that on the screen? Okay, dismissing. So dismissing, you have a positive view of yourself, but you feel like everybody else can't be trusted. And it's funny because this morning I did a thing on, have y'all heard of the Passport Brothers? Y'all heard of them? These are men who think that there's something wrong with women in America and they can't marry and get along with any women in America. They go to other countries because in other countries, it's always better in other countries. And now we're finding that they're having some issues there. But it's dismissing attachment. It's like there's something wrong with the world. I'm perfect. Everybody else, needs to get on board, right? So they have a positive view of themselves, but negative view of the others. And then they go, and these men, they go and they say, you know what? I don't even want a relationship in this other country. I'm going to use my passport to have very shallow relationships. Because as soon as somebody wants to get close to these individuals, they dismiss them. They're like, no, you're getting too close to me. I don't even want a close, intimate relationship. They avoid emotional closeness. They only want shallow relationships. That's a dismissing, attached person. Caregivers of these people were unavailable to them. Their mamas were not available to them. They were unresponsive to their needs. And as a result, they struggled to form and maintain healthy relationships as well as expressing their emotions. They get into very shallow, very superficial relationships. And that's what's happening with the Passport Brothers. A whole online, there's an entire group of men who get online and they're all dismissive attachment. They get online and they just say terrible things about everybody else because they're not the problem. Who are these women in westernized women who want to get close to me? I'm not comfortable with them getting close to me. I just want a transactional relationship. Anyway, so that's them. Let me move on. Preoccupied attachment. Mary Main talked about preoccupied attachment. This is when you have a negative view of yourself, but a positive view of everybody else around you. This happens when you got very much inconsistent care as a child during infancy, and you feel uncertain in secure relationships. You're kind of anxious. You're like, how come you didn't call me? How come you didn't call me? You're supposed to call me. This is people who be texting you. Y'all ain't never been in a relationship with somebody that texts you all day long. You're like, oh, what's going on? I told you I'd call you at 5. I work till 5 o'clock. That's got to be okay. Like, why you calling me all day? I'm at work. Stop getting on me. These are preoccupied attachments. They had a primary caretaker who wasn't there for them, and they feel uncertain about themselves. They didn't have an affirming environment growing up. So they have this strong desire for closeness, but they're scared of it too. But in a way, they're scared of abandonment. these abandonment issues, right? People who have abandonment issues have this preoccupied attachment. They're worried. Is my partner going to love me like they want to? Does this person really care about me the way they think? That are walking around just stressed and worried about their relationships. And when the relationship comes to an end, all hell breaks loose. You know, they don't know how to let go of any relationship because they are anxious about it. That's anxious attachment. There's no termination among these people. They become overly dependent on their partner and they struggle with healthy boundaries. Those are preoccupied individuals. Okay, Mary Main is brilliant. Mary Main says there's a fourth, and that's fearful attachment. These people don't want to get close to nobody. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust anybody. It develops when the caregivers are just abusive and neglectful. And caring for the infant, they felt very frightened and overwhelmed. These individuals struggle with forming trust and intimacy in relationships. Very hard to regulate their emotions. The fearful attachment are explosive individuals. They have a hard time regulating their emotions. They exhibit avoidant behaviors, or they can also exhibit very desperate behaviors. So they fluctuate from I don't want you near me to please, please come near me. They have this fearful attachment. Fear. It's almost like a fearful attachment is a combination of preoccupied and dismissing. So it's almost like that chaotic attachment that you see. Okay. But you know, I just want to say therapy is a beautiful thing because therapy helps you increase your self-awareness. And if you find people who fall under some of these insecure attachments, there is a way that you can help them move to become more secure. First thing to do is to help them, number one, identify their attachment styles, which is why it's beautiful to have an assessment. There's actually an assessment you guys can use that you can use on your clients to help them identify. You can give back to them, say, hey, based on how you scored on here, you got a fearful attachment. No wonder you're not able to form these relationships and you get scared when someone tries to get close to you. Let's work on this. And you can start to move them to a healthier space. Okay, moving along, we have, my favorite one. I love this guy. Donald Winnicott. Look at that nice old man. I like him because he spent a lot of time with social workers. He trained lots and lots of social workers. He's British. He's a pediatrician. And he talked about, of course, the early stages are critical for physical health as well as emotional health and psychological growth. And he categorized it. All of them make categories, and researchers, we love doing stuff like that, putting people in groups and categorizing everything. We enjoy that sort of stuff. But he talked about developmental stages and milestones. So at the beginning stage is this absolute dependence. And this happens in infancy. And he talks about this holding environment. By the way, the holding environment is so important because it is a way for a mother to create the world in a way where the baby feels safe, protected from danger. And you as social workers have to understand how to do this for your clients so that when they come into hold on a second. Not right now. Not right now. Come back. Okay. Sorry. You as social workers need to try to replicate this for your clients, particularly those who have attachment issues early on. Creating safety for your clients is so important. How you decorate your office, having peaceful, I have a lot of peaceful music. I have like candles. Y'all see my office. This ain't my office. This is a virtual office, but you see my office. It's very peaceful. There'll be water running. I'll have a candle going, incense, all that stuff that's like deep breathing, because you want a holding environment for your clients to be safe and secure. They know that when they come into your space, virtual or in person, when they come into your space, that they're safe. So it's important to do that for babies, because that helps to create positive attachment. But it's also important to do that in your practice, because that helps to create and to change a lot. That's what's going on with our adult clients as well. So, this, Winnicott says, listen, babies are completely and ultimately reliant on caregivers for survival. Relying on them. Caregivers' ability to meet the infant's needs, being responsive and attentive. The infant develops a strong sense of trust and security. It's so important. And I think it's funny why babies smell a certain way and they're cuddly and they look all cute. There's got to be a developmental reason for that, because we fall in love with them. The more we interact with babies and how people react when babies are around, this sort of thing it happens, right? It just happens. And so parents assure support, protection, safety in the experience of holding and cradling and singing and feeding. It's this is absolute dependence. Okay. Moving on. Primary maternal preoccupation. This is formed with the mom. I just remember having my baby. I was obsessed over my babies. It was crazy. I was like a mad woman. I was like, my baby, wait, who's got children? Anybody got Journey? I know you don't have no kids. Let me see. Emily, tell us early on.
That was my whole life revolved around them. And I could be distracted by them constantly.
You
constantly go to church and sit with them and just watch them instead.
Your whole life melts away, and it's all about this child. I remember I held my baby so much that I had a dream. And in my dream, I looked down and there was this baby. I'm like, good grief. I'm like, somebody got to hold the baby. Who's holding the baby? Dare I put the baby down? Because I'm a social worker, and I'm like, where's the baby crying? I don't want my baby all messed up. I want to hear to my baby, So I was like a little overboard. But,
I used to get very anxious if other people took the baby for too long.
Yes.
And we had huge arguments with my mother-in-law about it. Like, that's my baby, not your baby. Give her back.
Yeah. Like, It's a mad woman. You're like crazy. You're sleep deprived, but you don't care. What you doing with my baby? What are you feeding them? What are you doing? Yeah. Thanks, Emily, for sharing. Preoccupied. It's an obsession. And the baby's obsessed with you too. So it's a mutual thing. What's interesting is that he talks about, let me see. Okay. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so it's a mutual obsession. So relative dependence. Relative dependence starts around 6 months to 2 years. The child starts to recognize, right? I don't want to be obsessed with my mama all day long. The child's like, you know what? I got it. I understand. And it's funny because you'll go to restaurants and the baby's like done with everybody in the family. The baby's interested in staring at the person in the next. If you have a baby in this age between 6 months and 2 years, the baby will turn around and start staring at the table next to them because they want some independence, right? I went out to eat over the Christmas break, and there was this cute little baby about 8 months old, and the baby wasn't thinking about his mama and daddy. The baby was turning around looking at us. We were new faces, new shiny. I had my big shiny glasses on. The baby was just captivated by other things. And so occupation with the mother kind of decreases around that time, and the baby wants to explore. It starts to become aware of its dependence on the mother, but it also wants to kind of get away, right? They want to start exploring their own individualness, separateness, but at the same time, remember that secure base. They need to have, you don't get too close, but stay close by. So they rely heavily on caregivers, for support. It's a delicate balance between independence and dependence. That's why it's called those terrible twos around this time. No, I'll do it myself. That's good. You want to see that. Okay, so he talks about transitional objects. Winnicott believed that these objects were healthy for the child, right? To manage feelings of anxiety and fear associated with this independence. So I know, the Snoop, what was it? Is it Snoopy? Linus? Was it Linus who had to have his little blanket with him? These are transitional objects. And anyone taking object relations theory? Object relations or theory, or the theory class? Object relations, you're not taking it? Okay, if you take, there's a whole class on this, by the way, talking about these theories. But, a blanket or a stuffed toy. I know I used to give my son, he had like a little stuffed animal that he liked to take with him. I would give it to him, he'd take it to him and take a nap with it at daycare because he was in daycare. I was working on my doctorate and I couldn't be there with him all the time, but I had a stuffed animal and he would hold on to that and he would sleep with the little animal at nap time. So it helped, right? To comfort the child while the mom was away. So these are help. It helps the child cope with separation, often a toy or a blanket. Magical powers. It's interesting. I don't know. I just think about little 2-year-olds walking around. They got a blanket and the blanket makes them invisible or whatever, like weird things that children do that I think is really adorable. But anyway, he talks about transitional phenomena. I think like for transitional phenomena, you have some children who have this fantasy, this interworld in them where it's just all about fantasy world, right? Fantasy world is their inner world. It's their imagination. And some children are very imaginative, but there is also the outside world and the reality of the outside world. At this age, children are starting to differentiate what is pretend play and what is actually happening right now. So their inner world is starting to be delineated from the outside world. I love this concept of the good enough mother. Lord, I talk about this in my practice all the time. I say, listen, when I work with couples, I'm like, I'm not trying to have you spend the rest of your life in this perfect relationship. That is not my goal. My goal is for you to have a good enough marriage. Just good enough. Because there is no such thing as a perfect relationship. And there's no such thing as a perfect mother. You want a good enough mother. A mother who doesn't have to be perfect, but a mom who is at least loving. Gets it wrong sometimes, but is able to say, okay, I got it wrong, but let me still continue to be loving and repair. So you want to have good enough relationships with people. It's never going to be perfect. There is no perfect childhood. There is no perfect situation. You need to also, important is to have a holding place of which to talk about what's going on with you. So, the goal is to be consistent with your partner, consistent with your children, and to provide loving care and to allow independence. Sometimes you have these overbearing moms and overbearing caretakers who don't allow their children to make mistakes, for them to make a mistake. Like they have to be able to give their child a healthy sense of independence. I love this good enough mother because Every time something happens, every time something go wrong, it seems like they blame the mama all the time. I'm like, well, you know what? The mama needed support. The mama needed help. The mom needs all this stuff. So there's a lot of blame to go around. We can't just blame one particular person. One particular thing can't be blamed. And I think I need to stress that a little more because, you know, if you think about it, you're like, what's these mamas doing messing up their kids, you know? But so that's not altogether fair. The next stage is toward independence. That's the third stage in middle childhood, toddler, all the way through adolescence, right? You're trying, it's very crucial at this stage for developing healthy boundaries and a healthy sense of self. That's what's important at this stage, toward independence. You haven't quite made it there, but children start to develop a sense of self. And they start realizing what their own needs and desires are, and they're more assertive and independent, but they need a lot of guidance. I know I have adolescents. I got teenagers in the house. They act like they grown. They be acting like they grown, like they don't need me. But then as soon as something happened, they leave their backpack at school and something happened, they first text me and call me. They don't care if I'm in class, teaching the class. They'll call me and be like, Mom, I need you to do this. Mom, I need you to do this. Mom, I don't feel good. I need you to do this. And so I'm like, I thought you was grown. I thought you could do it on your own. What you need me for? No, they need me. Teenagers really need their parents. Anyway, what you want to do is make sure that they have developed this true self. You teenagers and young children, especially in adolescence, when you're developing an identity, they need to form peer relationships. So you think you're important, but you're not really that important at that age. Really, it's what their friends are doing that has biggest influence over them. But you have to allow them to do these things, to explore, to have self-discovery, and for them to experiment with different types of identities. So they're exploring who they are, and it's normal. But the key here is for them to develop their true self, and they have to have an affirming environment of which for them to do that. Self-discovery. They have to be willing. And I think, you know, a lot of families tend to be very restrictive, tend to be overbearing, tend to use religion, tend to put people in these boxes and don't let them explore and develop and figure out who and what they are. And what happens if they're not given those abilities to explore, to figure out who they are, they develop a false sense of self. They don't even know what they want. They're so busy trying to please their parents, getting their parents' acceptance and their parents' validation, that they develop a false sense of self. Oh, wait. Someone put something in the chat. Oh, Emily, you want to share? Wait, you said my son is a freshman and told me that I've done a good job parenting him and that he was pretty much done now until he goes to college. I laughed. He hadn't required that much work in the long. You know what? As soon as they become freshmen, that's when it really gets tough. I don't know why. They need to take the phones away from kids in high schools. I am so tired of my kids texting me in these schools asking, I'm sick, come get me. I'm like, no. Thanks for sharing.
He misses the bus. He doesn't do his work. He doesn't get up anymore. Like, it is constant reminders. And no, that's actually a poor choice you're making right now. Let's talk about this again.
Yes. And consequences. Oh, I set my kids down. I said, so if you don't miss the bus, what's the consequence for that? Let's talk about that before we even start the new school year. What's the consequence if you miss the bus? Because I have clients to see. I have classes to teach. I don't have time to drive you down there. And so that we lay out the consequences. So when they do miss the bus, I'd be like, uh-oh. I grab their phone. Thank you. The phone is mine now for the next 2 days. And they hate that. Nobody wants their phone taken away. But it's been working because they will run out their door and make sure they get their bus. Yeah, so you want to give them, you don't want to restrict teenagers. So it's a delicate balance. You want to give them freedom, But at the same time, you got to give them limits, because developing a false sense of self is really difficult. You want to be able to have this separation between, oh, wait, someone here in the chat said, yes, my daughter said at 19, I'm in college. You did your job now. Okay. So Emily, you're not alone. There's a bunch of people here in YouTube world who's saying the same thing. You've done your job. And I bet you, Miss Indira Deja, I'm certain your 19-year-old has called you many times and asked you for things. They really need you in college, by the way. Actually, I'm almost 50. I'll call my mom now and be like, Mama, what do I do? Help me with this. Anyway. So yeah, I think the false sense of self comes about when you struggle with your own identity and a sense of self and authenticity. You're not allowed to be separate from your parent, and you're not able to develop your own sense of care. And I think what happens is when children are parentified, when they take on the responsibilities of caregiving at too early of an age, and they're too responsible, they're not allowed to be children, it kind of gets into their developing a false persona. Okay, let's move on. Oh, God, it's been an hour. All right, let's talk about, hold on. Okay, Daniel Stern. We're going to talk about Daniel Stern, and then we're going to take a break because I've been talking for an hour. I need some water. Okay, Daniel Stern. And a lot of you guys are going to be using Daniel Stern in your projects, your projects when you present in class. He's a child psychologist. Daniel Stern is groundbreaking psychologist, child psychologist. He says, look, he comes along and he says, given all of these things that we know about attachment, we're too focused on the mother. We're too focused on the child. We need to start becoming more focused on what's going on with the mom. And he said, you know what? Moms develop with their child. It's a co-occurring thing that's happening. And if you're not a mom, if you've never been a mom and been in a position where you've had to care for a child and been in a position where someone's constantly looking for you, it's a sort of a development thing that happens where we have to understand that mothers and parents develop alongside of their babies. And so that's really interesting. And he said, can the mother sustain and support her baby? Enter into a nurturing relationship to protect, to integrate all of these identities, because of what happens when a baby is born. You're now a mother. You used to be a daughter, but now you're a daughter as well as a mother. And then maybe you're a working mom. Maybe you're a single mom. It's all these new categories. Maybe you're a wife. You're a wife, a mom, a daughter, a mother. You're all of these things at once. And taking on these new identities develops you into somebody that you can never, ever be. So you have to say goodbye. And I mourn the days where I only had to worry about myself. There were days when I wake up in the morning and I never even had to think about anybody but me. But as soon as you have children, those days are over. You're thinking about yourself. You're thinking about your spouse. You're thinking about, now I got all these little people and my kids are grown. I have a 20-year-old. He don't even live in the house anymore. I sit up in the morning. I'm like, how's he doing? I don't know. Like, sometimes he tells me, sometimes he don't. How you doing? Check in with me. So Daniel Stern writes about this, and I think it's really brilliant what he talks about a sense of self. So of course, when you're born at birth, you are experiencing just a sensory world. Okay, you're learning things. You're not a blank sheet of paper because you got genetics and temperament and all of this going on, but you're also really able to kind of understand the world. But eventually around 2 months is when the core self starts developing. And the core self is when infants, he noticed, has a basic awareness of their own existence. And I know, I don't know if you've seen these videos where children, I know I saw it when I was a psychology student in undergrad. We would watch videos where babies start noticing that they start looking at their hand and they're realizing, wait, this hand is an extension of my arm. That's an extension of me. They start to become aware of their body, body awareness. And babies recognize body movements and they start recognizing, okay, I'm somebody, but the world around me is someone different. Like that lady is my mom. This starts to happen around 2 months. That's my mom. And then here I am. They start realizing that things are separate. Separate themselves from their surrounding. Infants develop and around the subjective self that happens around 7 months. The subjective self happens, when infants develop a sense of their own emotions. This is where they start realizing emotions and identities and subjective. Hold on, there's somebody. Hi there. Okay, all right, sorry. I got distracted. Okay. So around their where are we? 7 months. Okay. They start to become aware of their thoughts and feelings and emotions. Okay. And then so this is what happens around this time. Yeah, if a mother suffers from depression, then this can prevent the child from sufficient intersubjectiveness. Yeah, so this is when this part around 7 months, it's something that he noticed has to do with the capacity for empathy, where if the mom is depressed, it's not really able to empathize with the baby so much, right? So that's one way he's able to talk about that happens if a mother suffers from depression. There could be some issues there because the empathy isn't quite there, right? The capacity for empathy isn't there, and it undermines the baby's ability to understand and navigate social situations effectively. So this is a very important part. The subjective self that happens around 7 months is really important for that empathy to be developed, because it helps with developing a sense of awareness and self-awareness. It starts around that age. And then around 15 months is the verbal self. And that's where they say I. That's how you know it's developed. They start using the word I, and they can begin to reflect and begin to form a true sense of self. There's a capacity for symbolic play. I think around this month, around 15 months is where you can do a lot of play therapy. That's really the best thing that you can do with children at this age. Around 15 months, you could do a lot of play therapy, a lot of symbolic play and language, expression of language happens around that month, that time where they're able to talk. No, yes, mine. I remember my daughter, she would be like, that's mine. And that's yours, but that's mine. She would say it, that's mine. She would say mines. She'd get it wrong. But, I don't know. It's almost been an hour and a half. Let's take a break, 10-minute break. I'll close down the YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to take a break. Hit the like button, follow, share, follow. What else am I supposed to say? I don't know what to say. But goodbye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Okay.